This video is now in session, and regarding the California gubernatorial recall election, the Democrats are finally seeming to get the message about how damaging this recall election can be. So currently speaking, the polls are showing that the Democrats are being favored, or I guess Gavin Newsom is being favored in a recall election by a YouGov poll. He is being favored by around 8 percentage points, which still is not a lot. And a lot of in a few other polls, Gavin Newsom is still in the margin of error, but that is better signs for the Democratic Party looking to keep Gavin Newsom in the governor's mansion. So Gavin Newsom right now, he's campaigning a lot, and he is ramping up his campaign tactics because of how Republicans have made inroads in this race. And I guess it's less actually about how Republicans made inroads in this race and more about how Democrats are working to make their voters turn out, to have their base turn out, especially because their base are low propensity voters. So the California recall right now still relatively within the margin of error, but it's still going. But it is getting better for Gavin Newsom. And the reason why this election is important relates to, I guess, executive orders. Even though a Republican governor for California will still have to deal with a Democratic state House and a Democratic state Senate, they can still do executive orders, and they can still make appointments to either the U.S. Senate and to other seats, other federal seats. So that's the main issue that the Democrats are facing. Even though they could technically afford to lose this governor's seat because it's not incredibly important to them legislative wise, it's still important for them both symbolically and as well as federally for appointments to both to any statewide position in the California's executive branch. So the last time we saw a successful recall happen was in 2003, when Gray Davis, who was incredibly unpopular at that time, was replaced by Arnold Schwarzenegger. In this race, we saw an issue arise regarding the recall question, where the first question asked if Gray Davis should be recalled or not, and then the second question is who should replace Gray Davis if he is recalled. In that scenario, in that election, we saw Gray Davis and the Democrats falter on what to do with the second question. Should they be consistent and say don't answer the second question, or should they be safe by saying if Gray Davis doesn't win the first question, then here's who to vote for the second question? Ultimately, Democrats were split on that kind of thing, and because of that, Cruz Bustamante, even though he had the most votes of any Democrat, in the second question, he still lost because the Democrats were divided on whether to answer Cruz Bustamante or another Democratic candidate, or simply no candidate at all. So with that, Arnold Schwarzenegger was able to end out on top with 48.6% of the vote. And the same thing could happen in the 2020 election, where even though Democrats this time are consistent on saying that Gavin Newsom should be the only answer that Democrats give and no other candidates should be considered, a lot of people will still most likely have some kind of disparity between what the Democratic message is. And if Gavin Newsom is recalled, then that is a death spiral for the Democratic Party in this recall election, because they have campaigned so much on saying leave your second question blank. And if that second question is left blank, then Republicans are surely going to win that second question. So I guess when it comes to this race, Larry Elder, Kevin Faulconer, any of these Republicans, top name Republicans, John Cox, could end up on top just because of how the recall election works. And ultimately, whether this recall election is constitutional or not, that has been decided by the courts already. they said that the California gubernatorial recall election is constitutional, because some people did actually have reservations about the constitutionality of this, since essentially you're saying even though Gavin Newsom could have the plurality of the vote, he still may end up losing just because he's not eligible for the second question. So those concerns have been rested for now. And then the other, I guess, concern for the Democratic Party after this election is what to do about future recall elections, because it's very easy in California to call a recall election these days. Almost every single governor since 1960 has faced a recall attempt, and recall elections have happened multiple times at this point. So the fact that you can have just a few million Californians say, "I want to recall Gavin Newsom," it's pretty dangerous for that to happen, especially when I guess the minority party usually has enough votes by itself to call for a recall election. You usually do not need votes of the incumbent party to call for a recall election, since California is not super democratic. So I guess California is not like Vermont. So that's the issue that is being faced by the Democrats at this very moment, and that's the issue that's being faced by Gavin Newsom. This election is happening on September 14th, so it's just a couple of weeks away from now. And whoever wins this election could potentially make some very important moves when they're in the executive mansion. But more often than not, we're gonna just see a continuation of what happened before, legislative-wise. With the only difference just being a few federal appointments by a Republican governor. So that's the situation at hand for the California gubernatorial recall election. So far, Gavin Newsom has started to go back up in the polls, and meanwhile, Republicans are still mainly centered around Larry Elder, the conservative talk radio host from the LA area, and that's the state of play when it comes to this election. So that's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it. This video is now adjourned, and I'll see you in the next one.